Good afternoon. Welcome to the Authors Hour. My name is Fred Zerm, and I represent the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center. We are a volunteer organization whose mission is to promote writers and writing on the institution grounds, and we hope beyond, by both supporting and supplementing the activities of the Chautauqua Writers Center. We sponsor several events every week. On Sundays at 5 o'clock in the Pros Room on the second floor of this building, writers and listeners 18 years old and above are invited to participate in an open mic session. I get the feeling we're mostly above 18 here. This Friday, every Friday at 1:15 in the Garden Room, which is on the first floor of this building, we will offer an informal critique session. If you bring in, just to be safe, 10 copies of 1 page of prose or poetry, you'll get feedback guided by John Rankingham, who's a professional writer, has taught at the center. Today, this Tuesday, and every Tuesday, we have 2 Chautauqua writers who will present their work. At halftime, I'll tell you about our special annual event. Books will be for sale, especially by hand, after the reading, and we should also have time for a short Q&A. Our first reader is Sandee Gertz, who is a native of Western Pennsylvania and the author of The Pattern Maker's Daughter, a poetry collection from Bottom Dog Press. She has published her poetry, essays, and memoir pieces in literary journals for over 25 years, including Green Mountains Review, Gargoyle, Poet Lola, Northern Appalachia Review, Wild Roof Journal, the Texas Northwest Press, and most recently in the Pittsburgh Quarterly, where she explored her North-South divide in a piece entitled Nashville, Pennsylvania. She has been recognized as one of 16 working-class poets in world literature today, and is a Sandberg Limestone Poetry Award winner, along with being a Pennsylvania Commonwealth Fellowship recipient for poetry. The most recent award was the Mary Jean Carrion Prize here at Chautauqua in poetry. Mary Divinger described her award-winning poem, The Leavings, as feeling like, quote, an entire novel or memoir, projecting the reader across time and distance with narrative fragments connected by dashes that feel like stitches of silk thread. She has completed a memoir chronicling her coming of age with an atypical seizure disorder entitled Some Girls Have Auras of Bright Colors, and is currently working to complete a novel based in her hometown of Johnstown, Pennsylvania. She teaches creative writing at Cumberland University as an associate professor. She is also a board member of the Pancho Panza Literary Society, with whom she co-teaches a poetry workshop in Dublin, Ireland, in the summer months, and she just got back. So, yes. Let's welcome Sandee Gertz.
Thank you so much, Fred. Great to be here with Anne, and once again, and to see you all. I am reading from a novel, and so that I don't talk and take all my time, I wrote down some comments for you that are in poetry. I'd like to bring you today a bit of magical realism from urban Appalachia. The Republic of Jerusalem's Trumpets is a literary fiction novel I've been working on for quite a number of years. It chronicles the borough of Shea, based on my real borough of Dale in Johnstown, PA, which I didn't even realize was Appalachian while growing up there. I only knew we were very closed off from other parts of the world, mainly because of those impenetrable mountain ranges on either side. I have written many poems about this colorful old world place in The Pattern Maker's Daughter, but I was moved to begin this novel after I'd gone back to my tiny borough to work with the children there on a PA Humanities grant in poetry and art. And here's where I was both shocked by the poverty and changes to the places I called home. Here's some more of the synopsis so you can get a little idea. The demise of the steel industry has left a once thriving neighborhood with new hunger, a place where the glitter girls are left to roam in a world of streamer-decorated bikes, algae-filled backyard pools, and hopscotch diagrams on cracked sidewalks. That is, until the emergence of a federally funded program which encourages the children to create art about the beauty and decay of their neighborhood. As art is amplified in Shea, the children begin to change in drastic ways. At the same time, Pretty Boy, who I read about last time I read here, a closet artist who leads an underground network of teachers, and Barnard, an eccentric gardener, are uncovering secrets about the borough's trumpet flowers that bloom only in blight and contain hallucinogenic properties. Known colloquial in my borough as Jerusalem's trumpet, what my mom always called them, the forbidden plant holds ties to the Native American Antep culture, and when Alam, a Chumash native, arrives, he brings revelations about his people and the Pennsylvania's Shawnee connection. This novel is a testament to how art can bloom in forgotten places and is a tribute to Shea and its immigrant industrial way of life that is disappearing from the landscape. I have a prologue called The Glitter Girls, and then I have this very brief, and then a chapter called The Prayer Chain. How many of you had a prayer chain growing up? Or you had to pass it on? Okay. The Glitter Girls prologue. And so the girls do fly. They fly back to another time when the borough was more lush. They ran into the lush green grass, breathing in the cleaner air of the shadow side of Shea before steel mills and smoke. The apples and pears tasted like nothing the girls had ever eaten, pure and flavorful, like a spray of the most sugared juice they drink in cartons at the fire hall's federal breakfast in the mornings back home. They rolled over into the dewy grass and let the stain of dirt and mix on their skins as they lounged, their lithe bodies huddling together in a heap, inhaling a whiff of a friend's neck like an intoxicating familiar musk. The girls were not old enough yet to smell like sweat that was unpleasant. They were able to perspire and be dirty for days, and the odor produced was only one of a humid rain in midsummer. They didn't care if they were too close to each other's scent, or if a greasy hand that had just eaten kettle chips spread out on the other's stomach brushed against them. Their ages were a freedom they thought that would go on forever, before puberty and all the darkness there, allowing them to never feel shame for anything, unless it was stealing an extra cookie from the Beulah United Methodist Church kitchen on the Wednesday night gatherings where they ate pizza and listened to stories about Daniel in the lion's den. These short visits meant that just as soon as the girls would get bored with tumbling in the grass, they'd wind up back on David Street, floating in an algae-tinged pool in Ashley's backyard, watching Pretty Boy sashay down the street with a radio to his ears, and wondering when they would eat again, or if the summer lunch would close for some unexpected holiday for presidents. Barnard's porch seemed far behind them, where they had been listening to his soft flute and feeling the warm syrup sun on their cheeks, only slightly aware that their faces were turned upward toward the compulsive winds of the Conemaugh Gap, the mountain gorge portal that separated them from other more civilized places where the people pronounced all their vowels and didn't lift up their voices at the ends of sentences in a Pennsylvania Dutch accent. No longer in the grip of humidity of Shea's summer, they had soared over the Crescent and the Allegheny mountain ranges just prior to where the gap opens up in a wide, gracious V, giggling and holding onto their glitter-thong shoes that remained barely affixed to their toes. Ashley always bit her lip when making contact with the blue eye of the mountain dip in formation. Her skin reflected the light from the sun that was dimmed in what came to be known to them as the shadow side of Shea, a place distant in time from her slipshod house with the yellow plastic siding falling off a bit from the exterior walls and into the alley. As the Glitter Girls flew, they could always hear the sound of a distant flute and knew that Barnard was still in delirium on his porch, playing, allowing them to see a light. As long as he was playing, they could stay out as long as they liked in the sunset air, ignoring I'm not going to touch it again. Ignoring the calls from their mamas who thought they were at the tiny tot playground or having one more lesson at the art center that had opened down the street on a redevelopment grant. They'd get home soon enough, the moms would mumble under their breath. After the glitter girls filled their stomachs with fruit, they walked through the grove, trying to place the streets of Shea they knew overtop the dirt and stone paths they walked on in the shadow side, greeted by a Shea of the past, before dollar stores and poverty, to a time when the soil was that of an orchard, a sea of cherry trees and seven sun flowering bushes, some tall and floral red buckeyes, and of course the labyrinth of unending rows and rows of spraying Jerusalem's trumpets, always open, always waving in the air, with the trumpet version of the hymn, For All the Saints, playing as though through some heavenly speaker. Now for the prayer chain. Now you'll notice that people have labels, and I don't believe in labels of people, but this is just how they are in the borough. There had always been a certain day of the week to do each task that needed to be done on the charcoal gray porches that graced the brick four-square homes of Shea Borough, or from the insides of vinyl houses that shot up when the turn of the century steel mills were first raging with blast furnace fire. Red wagon mother to the bread shelves on Tuesday, house-dressed woman on her knees with a bucket mopping with just enough water not to mold the wood on Thursday, and all the shift-dressed young mothers choosing eggs from the farmer's truck that pulled up to David Street on Fridays with melons and cantaloupes spilling over the tops of his bed. They balanced toddler tykes on their hips as the farmer gave out suckers to the kids, jumping up to touch the apples as the mothers remembered to open up the white containers to check for cracks in the shell. By day, Shea was the kind of place where you'd see the adolescent glitter girls racing barefoot in shiny thong sandals on the sidewalks toward a gathering hopscotch game, their blonde manes streaming out behind them, and their bathing suits showing a faint tinge of green algae from the lack of chlorine in the backyard makeshift pools. It was a place where no one questioned Red Dragon Mother in a frock dress walking bent back and pulling her wagon, a raisin-haired girl, silent and bobbing along the sidewalk cement divots. A place where you'd see a nearly middle-aged man named Pretty Boy dressed in his periwinkle blue silk, dancing through the hopscotch diagram sideways, his gold watch glistening with spit, and heading to the 2 o'clock class. And it was a place where the proper women of Shea on Wednesday mornings when the clock struck 10 a.m. could be found affixing the trousers of their steelworker husbands to the rope lines stretched across the sunlit backyard, with the clothespin ladies gossiping or praying in alternating chants with the other voices of the borough, all in unison, and knowing that tomorrow would mean ironing and the cool insides of bedrooms, maybe a flicker of a soap opera as time could warrant, and the making of pudding from scratch. In some Midwestern towns, it is said that a hierarchy is determined by the state of cleanliness one achieves in their house and yard, and Shea, deep in urban Appalachian folds of western Pennsylvania, was judged in not unsimilar kinds of measurements. However, in Shea, going to church with regular attendance was also a factor. Once you attended 3 or 4 times and opened the wide slate doors of the Beulah United Methodist Evangelical Church on Von Lunen Street with the green Grecian dome perched on the slight incline that it loomed over the borough, you were quickly enfolded into the world of the Wednesday night suppers. And the ever-popular and endlessly successful, this was affirmed by many a testament from a church member with a healed heart or knee replaced tenderly, the prayer chain. It was a place where walking down David or Messenger Streets or one of the several terrace lanes that rose up from the lowest point of the valley and stretched in parallel lines, crossing across the Shea landscape, you could see a body floating in the upper airstream of the backyard. A patient in a hospital gown being lifted just 50 feet above the clothesline lady's chain of words and prayers and bouncing from yard to yard, held in air by a raft of wafting blankets that would normally be hanging on the clothesline, but were enlisted for duty along with the early summer winds. Amens and blessings would utter from the gaping mouths of the house-dressed ladies and shift-dressed mothers with babes at their feet as they situated themselves directly underneath the body, holding him or her afloat while simultaneously pinching clothespins into the cobalt of the Shea summer sky. And if you listen closely, you could hear all this accompanied by a symphony of time-tested, carousel melody-driven evangelical hymns. The chain began at the telephone line inserts the church office where one Mrs. Piper took the first call of clear request and transcribed it carefully onto a dull pink phone message pad. The line of cord rolled and coiled underneath her desk and brushed against her sturdy pantyhose, the kind that hid the varicose veins that all the ladies of Shea seemed to fall prey to, and down into the underneath of the ceiling's Challenger Bible class with the overstuffed green velvet chairs, and then it wove its way down the ivory steps out the vestibule and into the underground streets of Von Lunen, until it reached up through the earth in a patch of fully open Jerusalem's trumpets, just outside the perimeter of Abby Lawton's fenced yard of proper geraniums and urns. The sprays of trumpet flowers that folded, unfolded, and unfolded with nightfall and sunrise, the only flowers to bloom in concrete and half-soil of alleys, and only where there is blight or decay. And up through these bushes of flowers, the telephone cord twisted itself into the white petals to rise and speak and announce its fervent need of the day, accompanied by a hymn that originated from the spring trumpet flowers. Blessed Assurance was usually the tune, and soon everyone walking down the alley or in the backyard would join in singing it, their voices rising in either bell soprano, faint falsetto, or the occasional tenor. Did anyone hear if Ralph is out of surgery yet? One lady might cart to the next, and across the backyard fences it would travel until some lady hanging some white cotton shirt or a navy pair of trousers dropping clothespins into the grass would answer back. And that answer would come traveling back through the backyards of Shea, the words sailing along in the fresh valley air before becoming soiled and mixed with remaining steel dust residue left in the lower airstream. Tell him I'm praying for him, another clothesline lady would yell, as some glided back into the bowels of their houses through cellar doors that contained steep steps leading into more lower basements and further into the cobwebbed, unused areas to the land of washing machines, father's tools, and tables for folding clothes. Laurel had seen women hanging clothes on a line all her life. She's the one running the program, and heard the talk and the words of the people on the prayer chain. In fact, each evening there would typically be a call she would answer, and the caller on the other end would forgo the hellos and pleasantries to simply say, "Prayer chain request, can you take it?" With the pronunciation of the question lumping up at the syllable's end in authentic Pennsylvania Dutch. There was a special pad of paper specifically for these inside a drawer of her father's old mahogany desk in the dining room. At the top, it had written in large Sharpie letters, "Don't forget to pass it on." But until she was walking with the Glitter Kids one day, searching for high water marks from the Shea 1977 flood to write about, she had forgotten the ritual. The church member on the prayer chain would then appear as a floating body bouncing up and down the backyard, down to tied loosely around the neck, and perhaps being wheeled into recovery, the patient finally awake and maybe eating Jell-O or welcoming guests into his room. Laurel stared at the sight from the side of her vision as though she were in a dream, the same way she felt when Whiny Arnold told her about the cafeteria ladies at the fire hall dancing inside their hollowed-out kitchen, the cavernous shelves of flour and sugar bags ripping open as the grandmothers abandoned their fleshy bodies and jumped with light across the stainless steel counters, shaking rolling pins and balls of powdered sugar crystals into the air. Just then, Laurel heard Mrs. Deets, an alley lady with a rear address, yell out over the clothesline, "He's out, and they got all the surgeon was looking for." After the requisite celebrations of clapping and lifting of babies into the air, perhaps a well-warranted break to push a toddler on a swing or pull up their crop pants, exposing their legs a little to the sun while sitting on a towel in the grass, the good news would coil itself out from the Jerusalem's trumpets and back into a telephone cord that would wind back again to the church office and Mrs. Piper's pantyhose, where, with perfectly painted peach nails, she would check off the patient's name with a yellow legal pad list before moving on to copying the Sunday bulletin. A few hours later, when the sun began its golden spells of descent, Red Wagon Mother and Silent Girl would appear yet again, the former's head staring down into the cracks of the sidewalk and pulling her cargo from the bread shelves of the A&P and some other unknown errands from Broad Street. The pair were known for never speaking to the other ladies of Shea, who were busy with domestic concerns that didn't seem to apply to them. Their job was walking. It was said that Silent Girl's sister had left their dismal house at the end of David Street, discovered as a baton twirler who could twirl with flames and matchsticks. She was taken up out of Shea in Ascension by Penn State officials as they offered her a scholarship straight from the Ferndale High football field's 50-yard line one Friday night when the lights blazed with the homecoming football game and topless Camaros held queens and runners-up. Twirling girls, one ticket escaped from walking all her life, and her father's blood cough from working in the asbestos of the train shop in the mill. Often, people just disappeared like this in Shea, one day sashaying down the street with a baton or cigarette, the next never to be heard from again. House-dressed women on their beige stoops shrugged their arms across the hedges to other shift moms and noted the increasing cost of roast beef at the local shop and saved. No one questioned much in the borough, and no house-dressed lady or shift-dressed mom nor red wagon child commented on the decline in the number of people in the pews at Viola, nor the dwindling numbers of people to call on the prayer chain, nor the lack of the time-tested practice of using lavender soap to clean the insides of trash cans in the alley on alternating Fridays. And one morning in early summer, when the steel worker husbands awoke for their breakfast of 6 a.m. egg cups and black coffee, the women brought in the Daily Tribune Democrat that announced a federally sponsored poetry and art program coming to their borough in the old Hobbs House back carriage home. They noted it with mild surprise. The kids are going to write about the borough history, it says on the front page of the neighborhood section behind the comics and the obituaries. The beauty and the blight, it says. What in Lord's earth could they find to write about here? The husband retorted as his wife sighed and loaded the dishes into the sink for scalding. Someone needs to write about that Barnard up on Bloom Street, steelworker husband said. He's pretty crazy in those silk robes, playing the flute all day and setting out spinach on his porch for kids. Lord knows what he's doing behind that 10-foot fenced-in backyard, probably smoking something he shouldn't. Outside, Abby Lawton was bending to her blossoming yellow tomatoes in the yard next door. There would be months to wait for their sweet ripening. Mrs. Say checked her cucumbers with quiet astonishment. They had grown 2 inches overnight. Underneath the Shea soil, deep below where the mill's sooty air had touched, was a stream that was navigable to the Atlantic and a fertile loam from Shea's orchard path that brought up a rose bush out of even the dilapidated corner Victorian stony hedge line. And when the dusk of David Street finally turned to black, you could hear the flute of Barnard starting up its ethereal syncopated tune. Porch sitters and elderly swing setters and shift workers all listened without really hearing it, taking swigs of either coffee or Budweiser, the Pirates game on the radio competing for their attention. And far off, though only Barnard knew it, in the distant reaches of California's Shumash Caves of Santa Barbara, another flute was playing, the Coic voice tune of an ancient people that once crossed the Rainbow Bridge of the Bering Strait and should never, if the universe was right, cross paths with the Shea residents or the Shawnee of the Keystone State. In the alley's new darkness, the Jerusalem's trumpets began their secret unfolding and filled the air with a dizzying scent. Pretty Boy in his dusk attire stopped and stooped over the intricate centers of the Daturas Fibonacci sequence pattern, visible only to those who cared to notice the sacred geometry, to inhale a moment before making the turn up Anders Alley and into his rear apartment address for the night. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Sandee. The descriptive details certainly evoke the time and a place. And you also did a good job overcoming buses and trucks and all kinds of things. Thank you. Well done. The Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center also sponsors several special annual events. This summer's Authors Among Us Book Fair will be held on Sunday, July 13th from 11:30 to 2 on Vester Plaza. If you have a published book you'd like to sell, please apply at our webpage. I'll do this a few different times, so a few different things, chq.org/FCWC, the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center. The annual writing contest for writers of all ages closes on July 27th. You can find out more about the rules and how to submit your work at chq.org/FCWC. On August 4th, the Friends will hold the annual Robert Pinsky Favorite Poem Project at 5 o'clock in the Hall of Philosophy. At this gathering, selected Chautauquans read their favorite poem and briefly explain why it means so much to them. That's right. For applications, you can go to chq.org/FBWC. Just a reminder that we'll have a short Q&A period at the end of the second reading. Our second reader is Sandee Wallace. Anne is Poet Laureate Emeritus of Jersey City, New Jersey, and host and producer of The Wild Story, a podcast of poetry and plants for the Native Plant Society of New Jersey. She is the author of Days of Grace and Silence, a chronicle of COVID's long haul through Kelsey Book, and Counting by Sevens from good old Main Street Rag. Her current manuscripts in progress include a poetry collection, Keeping Room, and a memoir called Breathing Lessons on living and writing through illness again and again and again. Her work is online at AnneWallacePhD.com and on Instagram at AnneWallace409. It's not getting up 409, is it? No, okay. Okay. Sandee Wallace.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here again. Last year, Sandee and I read together, so it's a treat to be back here at the podium with her. That nice timer. So, last year I read from Days of Grace and Silence, a chronicle of COVID's long haul, which Fred just mentioned. I'm going to read a couple pieces from that, but mainly I'm going to read from my just finished, brand new manuscript, poetry manuscript called Keeping Room, as in the keeping room or keeping room. You can read it however you like. And as I was sitting here, I got a notification, because we can never escape the news, that the Senate just passed the anything but beautiful text bill. So I am going to start in a way that I didn't expect to, but I'm going to start here with a poem called In State, which I wrote on the day of Trump's second inauguration in January. And you may remember at that time that there was a bit of Jimmy Carter had recently died, and the flags were to be at half-mast, but Trump wouldn't have that. And so the flags and the Capitol were at full mast, even as Jimmy Carter was still lying in state. So this is called In State. America is lying in state today, laid bare in this consecrated place where she fought against her ravaging 4 years ago, where she cried and shook through her death throes as we turned away, away, and again away. Here, the fury of a jilted man caught the wind, as it always does, and poisoned our nation's imagination until we could no longer see what we know we all saw. America is lying in state today, in this sacred place of the people, where past commanders rested, laid out under the guard of a flag, bowing in gratitude under the watch of a nation in grief. Today, the remains of America are laid before us, here in the rotunda, at the feet of a placid man, beholden to the spectacle of pomp without circumstance, of a lowered flag, ordered to stand without consent and without respect at full mast. Together, we mourn our beloved stars and stripes, limp and shuddering, sad witness to this day's blustering death rattle. And then a more recent poem, The Alchemy of Crisis. Rage broils below my skin, layered between despair and turmoil. I want to slip a butterfly needle under the thin dermal sheath, pull back the plunger and drain the hot fluid built up and ready to bubble over. Instead, words seep from my fingers onto the page, loosen the grief until it softens and flows, banking on alchemy, that they arrive in your ears as resistance, as hope. We will not back down. The day another gun law is repealed, I see my first tulip of the season, the buds still green, closed up tight, showing just a blush of ripening red, and the bleeding hearts begun unfurling their fragile pink flowers in the community garden at the end of my street. The warm, damp air, the drops of color, the too sweet scent of hyacinth smother me. Blooms spring from the concrete and in narrow patches of light in green between buildings. Tended or not, brazen flowers show up each spring and claim their light. I think that hope is often found, in, well, not just places, I was going to say in places like this, but the truth is I live in a city. I don't live in a place like this. So it can be found anywhere. You just have to look for it. And so for me, that means the blooms that spring up in the cracks of the concrete or wherever I might find it. So here's another one along those lines, lessons in survival. This year's cherry blossoms grow directly from their trunks, bypass the leggy limbs to pull straight from the marrow. The trees know to adapt in times of crisis. Like us, as we hold what is young and fragile so close to our hearts. And I'm reading out of order, so I have to keep looking at the page number here. How I live now. If I extend my gaze outward from the pain held within this small body, I may collapse from the enormity of our grief. Sometimes it's really hard to look at the big picture, right? It's overwhelming. They were just talking about this, not in these terms at the Daily Show, but the need to find humor, not to laugh at the people who are suffering, but to laugh at people's responses to it, to other things going on. So I'm not a comic, obviously, but I think looking for joy, hope, resilience is so crucial. We find our way through one way or another. So that's one thing I'm continually trying to do in my poetry. And right now I want to turn to a poem from this collection. It's called Passages. So I'm going to return to the idea of hope, but first I want to share one piece about I write a lot about illness. This collection is all about illness, and about the pandemic more broadly. And writing illness is not an easy thing to do. It's hard to find language for pain, for suffering, for grief, for loss. And it's also just very heavy to write about and to ask you to listen to or to read. And so finding those little moments to insert feelings that go beyond pain are really important. But then there's also the struggle of trying to write itself. So this is called Passages. It's been decades since my body held a narrative clear and simple. It turned to poetry long ago when a refrain emerged, was repeated with life interrupted once and again and again. A poem always begins in the middle or someplace nearby because truly, have you ever tried telling a poet to begin at the beginning? When doctors ask me or my daughters how our illnesses began, oh, the poems we compose on paper-lined examination tables. Each one of us, a stanza braided to the other, with no beginning and no end. The poet in me dares not ask if we're always muddling around in the endless looping middle of this story. How might we ever write our way out? Latent. A body can feel only one pain at a time. The brain meters it out, flips a switch, receives an aching signal from one direction, not another. One pain at a time, the body is kept safe. So I have long COVID. Well, I'm mostly recovered from long COVID, but I was very sick with it for several years. And both of my daughters have long COVID, and my youngest most recently, she became sick with COVID 3 years after my oldest and I did. So in December 2022 is when she first became sick, and it became a really horrifically painful and debilitating case of long COVID in winter 2023. This is a sort of longish narrative poem about one of the medical tests that she needs to have. It's called This Morning in Nuclear Medicine. I consider the orange pill tucked inside the blue pouch buried deep within my purse. I am too tired to fish it out and wash it down with a swig of warm water, even if it holds the power to stop my weary head from pounding. Nearby, my daughter sleeps inside the NM830 machine that tracks radioactive movement inside her stomach, a bland microwave egg churning, breaking down, its steady journey recorded and projected on the computer screen across the room. All I ask is that if I die, don't save me. A woman's voice from behind the curtain machine next to ours, please. And a man responds with gentle instructions, and I can tell, though I cannot see, with gentle touch. We need to get you on the table. I have your oxygen. I hear him position the woman for a sequence of lung scans. A test I was scheduled to have 4 years ago, so sick like my neighbor, but for some hazy failure in communication, never did. The man guides her arms above her head for the next image, then down again. Her voice is small. I hurt so much. I do too, Patricia. I do too, I want to say. I want to dull the sharp volume of instructive voices, the plaintive cries of the woman, the terror-filled shrieks of the toddler pulsing from behind a curtain somewhere down the hall. I want to pull my daughter from the yawning mouth of the NM830. Pull her from another morning in the bowels of a hospital. The same hospital where the virus raging, I was once covered head to toe in a sheet like a corpse and wheeled inside for scan. Wary of the turbulence the pill in my purse might call forth as I wait 2 hours for the scrambled eggs to digest inside my daughter's stomach, I close my eyes and sink into the pulsing pain of this place. We just want to make you comfortable. The frail woman cannot hear the man, though his voice is loud and also kind. Her hearing is weak, her hips ache, her lungs burn. Finally, she is done. She is alive. I could never have done this without you. Jimmy, you're a keeper. The woman is wheeled away from this place before my daughter wakes. A new patient I cannot see is rolled into the empty place behind the curtain behind my back, and the pain gripping the base of my skull softens in the silence. Oh, thank you. That one's so layered with memories that it's hard to read, as you can tell. But in 2020, I was literally covered in a sheet to be taken inside the hospital because I had COVID, and that was that hospital's protocol for COVID patients. I was in many hospitals in 2020, and that was the only one that did that. It was profoundly dehumanizing. Nightmare with hypoxia. At night, in the car, my daughter and I have a meal delivery for Constantine, alone, tending the unending barrage of COVID deceased in a desolate warehouse. Our brakes give out on a cloverleaf exit. We miss the turn, careen out of control, fly past our destination, pick up speed on the empty streets, rocketing through red lights, flashing bright in the dark, deserted city. Faster, faster, on course to hit a building, a lamppost, an abandoned car, something. It will happen. It is only a a matter of time. That was a nightmare. It wasn't a true story. But these are the kinds of things that were racing through my mind as I was sick with COVID. I mean, when I was sleeping, if I was sleeping. Let's see, I'm gonna reset my time here. No, I'll do this one. This is called Assisted Breathing, and it's going to be published in One Art, which is an online journal, on July 7th. So it makes sense to read it here. Assisted breathing. Put on your own oxygen mask first. For years, I dispensed this snappy wisdom to myself and to friends lost in the sleepless nights, the conflicted allegiances of parenting. This was before people spoke of self-care. Back then, we were in survival mode. Back then, we needed to remind ourselves to breathe. But it wasn't literal. Nobody actually had an oxygen mask. Life has grown more fragile. When the air became thin, my mask went on first. The message, stay alive, so you can help your children. It still holds true, and it's no longer. Sorry, I've never read this one aloud before, and it's no longer a metaphor. So let's move on to some slightly lighter things. Clearly, I'm struggling with these. Funny, I've read so many COVID poems, but some of these are newer ones, and I've not read them, so I apologize. These are called Lessons in Care. It used to be called Raccoons in the Attic, but in this collection, I have a series of poems called Lessons in Blank. So this is now Lessons in Care, and this is anyway, it's self-explanatory. When my youngest was 4 or maybe 5, she suggested we create a sanctuary in the attic, so raccoons on the street would know to come in and be safe. But of course, the raccoons on the street and in the garden and on the cliffside already knew to shimmy up the side of the house to the porch roof and past the second floor, to squeeze through an invisible fissure under the eaves where they would find safety. I think she knew this too, and was simply asking me to leave them alone. All right, where am I in my list? Okay, oh, and this one, last year I was honored to receive the Poetry Prize from the Friends of Chautauqua Writers Center. So I thought, well, I need to read the poem that I won the award for. So this is called Tendrils. I stooped to loosen a thread of wild clover woven tight through my spotty lawn, and recall the morning I knelt on my small patch of yard and pulled stretch after stretch of unwanted stem, made room for grass in the barren spaces. My belly 8 months full, pulling at home in the Jersey August heat. I vowed to yank out every last bit. I rarely tug at the thin tendrils these days. I no longer need a soft surface for kiddie pools and yard toys. My lawn's future is short now as I welcome the spread and creep of native flowers, but the green threads winding across the earth remain a portal into the summer before motherhood. Before that, I learned that disruption and love paired together equals joy. Thank you. I'm so honored to receive the award for that one. And I do, as Fred mentioned, I have a podcast on poetry and plants, and I do write a bit about nature. I've mentioned it before as a source for hope. It's also a source for despair because I live in a city with a dwindling green, it was never green, footprint, but it's getting less green. But this poem is, kind of enjoying the perfection of nature and of our ecosystem. It's called Such a Perfect Ecosystem. Yesterday, I celebrated small things in a room packed with people who oohed when an entomologist told of the magnificence of the spring beauty, a plant with pale pink blossoms so petite and fleeting that most Jersey lawn tenders missed them flickered through the grass. I don't mean that we long for or regret no longer seeing them. I mean, we don't see the flowers at all. But they're not invisible. Not to the mining bees who light upon the tiny petals and coat their fuzzy bellies with the sweet pink nectar these beauties create just for them. It's so fascinating to me how, this plant literally is for this specific species of bee. And it's so fascinating to me how perfectly aligned things can be in the world, but we often don't see it because these things are not necessarily for us. So because they're for the other creatures that we live here with. I want to read one more poem from Days of Grace and Silence. It's called The Empty Casing, and then I have a very short poem to end with. Imagine this. If you have planters of parsley or dill growing outside in a sunny spot, odds are good that you have tossed butterfly eggs onto your pasta with the garnish or mixed them into your salad. Just imagine. Have you ever seen the egg of a butterfly before caterpillar, before chrysalis? The minuscule sphere, a perfect glassy orb deposited by swallowtail or monarch or fritillary, and perched so delicately on a leaf or the whisper-thin stem of your garden herbs. I saw my first last summer. I watched as the brilliant swallowtail, she visited daily for a spell, found my bed of parsley. I searched for a week, leaf by leaf, until I spotted it, one perfect egg. How small, how fragile, how large my shears. The egg stood such small chance against a quick sniff at mealtime, small chance against hot sun that can wither a wispy herb into the parched earth over a few dry days of drought. It's truly a wonder we have any butterflies at all. But my butterfly egg, it defied the odds. It hatched under my protective gaze, grew fat off the parsley I did not eat, spun a home around itself. I watched and waited as it grew strong. Then one morning, I found the empty, dry casing still stuck to the side of my clay planter. The butterfly, it was gone, flown away into its new home. And I will end there because I am at time. But thank you all so very much.
Yeah, some very challenging poems about challenging times. Thank you for sharing those. We have a little time for Q&A. If people have some questions they would like to ask either or both of our writers. Any questions? Yes.
And did you say you have a new book coming out?
This is the most of the poems I read today were from my new manuscript, which I just started sending out.
Let me just repeat. There's a question about whether there's a new book coming out.
And thank you for the question. Keeping Room is the new collection, but I have just completed it and I'm now sending it out to publishers. So there's no publication date or publisher yet. Fingers crossed.
If there's any justice in the world, I will not publish. Any other questions? No, before thinking?
I have a
Okay, good.
I wanted to ask because you are a poet, Sandee, but now you write fiction. Have you always been a fiction writer? I mean, now you've shared fiction with us. Have you always been a fiction writer? And like, what do those two different mediums provide for you?
Yes, thanks. So I guess you could say that, so mostly published in poetry. My book was poetry, but I would always write memoirs. So I do have that memoir about growing up with epilepsy, and I have published excerpts from that. But Fiction is what I love to read, the short story, and I love what I love to read often the most. But really, this novel, I always say I have no business writing a novel because my MFA specialty was poetry and creative nonfiction. But it just, after going there and working with the kids, I didn't say this in my intro, but I was going to. It literally came like from the divine that you have to write about this place and this experience and fictionalize this experience that I had literally with the glitter kids and the boys and the colorful characters. And I don't want to tell you how long ago that message came to me because it was like very, very, very long time ago and a lot of time passed. And I wrote the ending scene, so I've had the ending forever. So, I mean, I'm just going by feel. And yeah, I've only published like a couple chapters of this as excerpts. So yeah, I was never really published in fiction at all. It's just something I felt like called to do.
Yeah. Well, and I love how what you read was, the writing is so poetic. You're clearly, like, you can tell that you're a poet.
Any final question? Yes.
I'll do a follow-up, which is, where does your novel stand?
I am
I'm going to give you the
committed.
microphone.
I am committed to finishing this summer. And like I said, I've published a couple excerpts and a couple have gotten into some competitions and fights, but the full novel, I'm hoping to get an agent with this. Usually I don't want to go, like, I don't expect to go like to a big house, but I am hoping that I could get an agent for something like this and get it presented to hopefully an agent. So we'll see. It's going to take me a little while to edit and revise too, but I should have a full and complete first-ish, somewhat polished draft at the end of the summer, if God willing. Put it on the prayer chain.
Right, on the prayer chain, and we've had a public amendment here.
I do.
Okay. Very good, thank you for the questions and for the answers. Let me just make a few announcements and we'll close up. I want to make a few announcements about literary and other events. On Thursday, July 3rd at 3:30, Damon Young will discuss his CLSC selection, That's How They Get You, an unruly anthology of Black American humor. Tomorrow at 12:15, right here in the porch, the Young Readers Program will be discussing Carl Hyacin Wrecker, right here on the porch, as I said. Most Fridays, there's a community reading, but you may have noticed this Friday is July 4th. So there won't be a community reading, but there will be a community poem. If you go to poetry.chq.org or drop by the Poetry Makerspace, you can contribute to a poem about happiness is. Sort of after the Beatles, but also after Charles Schulz. But the more cuddly, happiness is a warm puppy, as opposed to happiness is a warm gun. Beginning today at 4 o'clock, our sister art, the theater, is presenting The Real James Bond Was Dominican. And please join us next week for another Author's Hour. We will have two fiction writers. Janet Crozier will read from her novel Shadows on the Heath, which focuses on Heathcliff from Wuthering Heights, while novelist Estelle Rausch, well, actually a surprise, she's going to select some things to read. Please consider joining the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center to help us present events like this and the other things that I've mentioned. Videos of this Author's Hour will be available on YouTube. If you search for the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center channel, you can get videos from 2020 when we all turned to Zoom. Forward. I do apologize. I did not have the presence of mind to ask you to come on camera for the Q&A. So we're going to have audio only and the camera on me looking at you. Okay. So anyway, thank you for coming this week. I hope to see you next week at the Author's Hour or at some other literary event. Take care. Bye.